Hello, welcome to the Teaching and Learning Virtual Summit 2021. This presentation is Rethinking Online Engagement with Problem-Based Learning. My name is Chad Parmentier. I'm a middle school teacher at Jackson County School District. A little bit of a background. I graduated in 2004 with a teaching degree and began working on my master's degree in instructional design and development. And I worked for colleges for several years, converting face-to-face classes to online classes and hybrid classes for distance learning programs. I worked through all different types of subject areas, and I also worked in development and was an LMS specialist. So it was a lot of technology, curriculum, and figuring out ways to deliver classes in a reputable way and assessments in an authentic way in a digital environment. So this past spring, when COVID hit, it really kind of brought to light a lot of the challenges we had faced in higher education, and we'd always speculated what would happen, or would there ever come a day when public education would start becoming virtualized at the public level. I mean, there's several virtual high schools out there, but they're pretty specialized in that. It wasn't the status quo until COVID hit. So with that said, when COVID hit in the spring, I knew right away that the first thing I needed to do was kind of build some bridges between the learning gap that was going to happen because of students being at home and the format of instructional delivery being changed on the fly, and the challenges that public school students would face working in a virtual environment. The first thing I noticed that I had to address was I needed to create high impact, high interest content, or infuse it with the content of my regular curriculum, or I was going to lose the students. An example of that would be, I was reading the novel Tangerine. It's a newer novel about a middle school student who goes to Florida and all these strange things happen. There's a sinkhole, the high school falls in it. There's muck fires and all kinds of things that are interesting for the kids. And the main character of the novel becomes friends with some other students who live on a tangerine orchard. They grow orange trees and tangerine trees. And one of the things the novel talks about is grafting the trees together to get different varieties of fruit and grow different types of fruit off of one single tree. And so I do hydroponics for the STLP program, and I've done hydroponics kind of quasi-commercially on my own. And I brought that to the Student Leader Technology program that Kentucky State takes part in. So I had the means to test this theory out. And so with my students, we tried to graft tomato plants together to find out if this idea of grafting was fiction or real. And that led us down the road of trying to identify in the novels that we read and the stories we read for class what is real and what is not. And that led to everything from using a microscope in class hooked up to the computer so that the students could see a live video feed from the microscope looking at different things. I think we were looking at the plant cells from the grafting, and I think we looked at a couple of other things just for fun because they really got into it. But it wasn't just about the technology or the specific hands-on things that mattered. Part of building those bridges was figuring out how to get the content to the students, and that involves a high level of technology and utilization of technology that currently is not used in public education, and it's used more in the higher education arena. Being that I'm from that arena, we use tools like Camtasia and Captivate and Lectora. Blackboard is our main LMS, or Moodle, or Canvas. Some really high-end, effective technology tools that are not available to the average, public school teacher, nor is the knowledge. So I knew that my lessons and what I was doing had to be high impact, high interest, and I wanted to involve problem-based learning, project-based learning, but I also wanted to infuse those elements of class that we needed, such as reading nonfiction articles. But I knew that if I just did, a novel like Tangerine or The Giver or Tom Sawyer, and then in between tried to give them a whole array of informational articles, I was going to lose them. It was never going to work. So what I tried to do was I try to create all-inclusive units that include vocabulary, the figurative language, and the nonfiction reading. And when it came to the nonfiction reading, I found a technology tool / website called CommonLit that I found really useful. CommonLit is, if I can shoot over to that their website, it's a website that basically is puts together nonfiction articles and binds them with novels. So you can search, like, for instance, to Kill a Mockingbird, and you'll find a whole bunch of different nonfiction articles that go with different chapter sets of the novel, so you can kind of cover that. And it's multi-level, so if you're teaching it in one grade versus another, it'll still fit. But the actual CommonLit site itself is really interesting, because I was reading The Giver at the beginning of this year, and I wanted them to get that nonfiction element. So we did the total control in North Korea. Now, the way CommonLit's set up, it provides students with audio, just as I was doing for my novel. And it also gives them not just audio, but audio that's sequenced. So at the end of each section, they have to answer a guided reading question, or they're not permitted to go on to the next section of reading, which is helpful because a lot of students just try clicking through it and then they bomb the assessment after the reading. So I like that aspect. And it was also, ADA compliant. You can adjust your font sizes, your colors, all that. And then you have the assessment afterwards. And that assessment, those assessment questions can be multiple choice, auto grade, multi-level, and they will shoot right back into your Google Classroom. So the whole unit will launch from Google Classroom or Canvas or any other LMS you're using. So I found that to be a useful tool for delivering effective instruction, because I think it's important that we infuse nonfiction and all those elements. I like to do it all within a novel unit or a unit of study, because I found that to be most successful. So if I look back here, I think I covered all this. Another element that I knew was critical, and it's kind of surprising to me that this has not yet really come up. I've not heard this in any conferences, presentations, professional development, but at the college level, the most important tool, community colleges, developmental courses, every course at the college uses are discussion boards. Discussion boards are critical because you need to allow students that asynchronous, which means not real time, that time to go in and digest the video, digest the lecture or the reading that they've done for class, think about it and process, and then in a calm and calculated way, be able to respond to a prompt that you give them or to other students. And so discussion boards play a critical role in distance education. And they can also be, with this day and age of Google Meets and Zoom meetings and whatnot, you can go back and look at discussion boards real time, live, and that brings a synchronous component to discussion boards that we didn't actually even have much at the college level. Another really important factor that I found was really critical was the ability to get those formative assessments, those formative questions out for both asynchronously and synchronously, along with summative assessments as well. But you can't really get to summative unless you're confident your students are learning and understanding the material as you go. So with that, I began looking for more tools that would be beneficial to delivering that level of instruction. So it started out that I just wanted to do hands-on and problem-based, but it led down this road of having to identify the tools to deliver it to the K-12 public school student in a way that was accepted by the district and understandable by students, and in ways that were successful across many different types of students. So I'll talk a little bit about another program that I had found. It's GoFormative, and I can pull their web page up here. GoFormative, actually I don't have theirs up, but it's on the PowerPoint, so give me here a second. So GoFormative is a program that is free, but to get all the bells and whistles, I think I pay like $14.95 a month, and I don't even know what the difference is between free and paid, but it's totally worth it to me because the amount of time I would spend grading at home without it by far outweighs the cost. So, but this program basically allows you to upload your old tests, quizzes in PDF format and digitize them so that they're multiple choice and or essay. If they're multiple choice, it'll auto grade. It'll push back into Google Classroom. It'll push into Canvas. It'll push in almost any system you want. It has a back-end LTI to deal with that. So any flavor LMS is good, but it's definitely aimed more at K-12 with the integration with Google Classroom. It'll import all your classes so that students can authenticate, and it works really well. But what was critically important about GoFormative is it wasn't just importing test or a quiz and digitizing it and having it auto grade, kind of like a Google form on steroids. I also needed a way to deliver content and wrap it all together. And as you can see here, I've got chapter 7 of Tom Sawyer. What I do is I record the audiobook while playing. I record the audiobook while screen recording the ebook. And as I record, I use my cursor and I go down the side of the page so that students know where we're at in the reading. Because when it goes full screen, it looks like they're just reading a PDF. But it's all, the audio is there, and I'm going through and showing where we're at any given time if they lose their way as far as following along with the reading. And then there are the assessment questions after that follow. And so once we go through the video, I'll ask questions in a Google Meet, and then if they're ready to go and take the assessment, they take the assessment. What I found really interesting about this is that some students like the fact I play this in the Google Meet. Students have asked that I actually inject myself during the novel reading and give my explanation and lecture in the video, because if I do it live in the Google Meet and I stop it, if they missed a day or needed to back up, they can't. Whereas if I infuse that into the Camtasia presentation that I do, they can stop, rewind, they can see it later. They like that. Of course, you can record your Google Meets, but it takes away a little bit because you get all the windows and things, and it makes it kind of small. It worked out better just to post the recording and then also play it live. But going back to what was interesting, some students wanted it played live in the Meet. Other students were accessing the formative on their own, listening to it, watching it, and answering the questions. Other students were either linking into the regular book, PDF version, which I post in Google Classroom and link in most of my formatives, and they just want to read it on their own, no audio, and then answer questions. And I found that to be really interesting. So what I realized is you have to deliver content, at least this day and age, as difficult as it is, in a multimodal digital format. So think of differentiated instruction, but having to do with the digital content you're delivering. So when they have that multimodal way of accessing the information, you see your scores start to go up overall. And when you're in formative, you can actually see the students and where they're at. And I started out with most of my students getting a lot of red marks. And so each one of these marks is actually a question. And so once I released them to work on these questions that are technically formative, you could make them summative though per chapter, I can see right away if the majority of the class starts getting like number 3 wrong. I can stop them and say, hey, let's look back at the chapter and see what it has to say about question 3. Some students you'll see don't have anything put in, and you'll want to address those students. Maybe they're not in the meet, but a lot of times they are. A lot of times students are there and they just are not participating. And you'll see that as the instructor versus it just being a Google Doc, or, well, you can do this in Google Docs, but you may not know otherwise. And so you can kind of reach out to those students and try to get them participating, motivate them to help, because you're watching them real time. And that was a critical part if you want to kind of infuse hands-on activities, problem-based activities. You can actually see them working together. Going back to discussion boards, they're very, very important. And I've just recently got it set up to do Google Groups. With Google Groups, I'm hoping to use that. I wanted to use that for this video, but I couldn't get the permission set from district in time. But I do have kind of an example from the spring. In the spring, I started out, we were all just kind of thrown in this. I was using Moodle, and I did notice some strange things. This was NTI day like 30, I think, which was quite far in. It was towards the end of March. And I noticed students would log in and answer these questions at different times: 9:59, 10:35, 3:25, 12:02, 10:06. And it would go all the way up through midnight, 2, 3 in the morning the next day. So I realized the students were working on different classes at different times. And so the discussion board was a great tool because it allowed them to do that. They could respond in that, methodical way for 8th grade. You can tell these are not the most robust responses, but they were great considering these kids had never had this. They were thrown into it, and it worked. So I've been working to get that back into my classes, and that's another really important aspect of distance learning. All colleges and community colleges and universities, it's the most important tool for them, and it's been for going on 20 years. So I do try to use that. Going back to CommonLit, not CommonLit, I'm sorry, formative, and the questions, that idea of problem-based learning, hands-on learning. We read The Giver. We did some short stories at the beginning of the year, and that period before Christmas, right after Thanksgiving, I wanted to do something high impact, high interest with the kids. And so as of recent online, the Dear Holmes letters are really popular. They actually sell them. It's a subscription you get. And I thought, wow, what a great way to do reading with my kids. Maybe they'd really be into it. So I got a subscription to the letters, and what the Dear Holmes letters is they send you like 1 letter a week, and it's a case of murder or theft, and Sherlock Holmes is on the case, and you're supposedly helping him, and you need to try to take the facts from the letters, because they come once a week for about 3-4 weeks. At the end of that time, you'll get the last letter, which is Sherlock Holmes, revealing what the answers to the case. So if you think of like Scooby-Doo, it's the reveal at the end. And you want to use all the information and facts from the letters up to that point to kind of arrive at the same conclusion before the reveal letter. So I did these with my students, and I put them in formative. I had to do a lot of I had to digitize them because they come in cursive, and the students struggle with cursive. So I converted the letters, put them into formative, put both comprehension questions and essay questions. What I wanted them to do is I wanted them to detail all the find all the details of the letter that were important, make connections between characters, and connect characters with places so that they could kind of slowly begin to solve the problem. And where this becomes a really good tool and allows me to do that is in the classroom. I'd be walking around when I give them an assignment, telling them to write down all the details for letter 1. And I could see if they're doing it or not. When you're online, it's very difficult to do that. So in this program, I can not just see one paper at a time or have to click through students. I can see everyone's pages, if you will, at the same time as the screen shows here. And I can check on students. I can encourage students that aren't missing. If they are not getting things right, I can go back and reteach. That real-time engagement really kind of facilitates and makes the problem-based and the hands-on learning possible. Without this, I'm left kind of in the dark. We all feel like we're in the dark anyways in a Google Meet because the students rarely talk. They rarely turn their mics on, which I don't blame them. You don't know what type of home life they have. Middle school and high school students are very sensitive about their surroundings. They don't want people seeing where they live. So if you're lucky, they turn their audio on. Most won't though, because someone runs by, someone yells, someone says something, the dog walks by, they feel embarrassed. So you rarely get any interaction that way like you would in a face-to-face classroom. And I don't force that issue. Instead, I divert it and try to get my interaction this way. And within each of these questions and answers, I can give them real-time feedback individually, which you can do through Google Classroom. You can't do through Google Meet. This was my only way to kind of tell a student, you're way off track. Privately, I could do that through the feedback option per question in this system. So just to go back up top real quick and to add to that building bridges, in order to have meaningful learning, and effective technology in education, you have to look at your end goals and you have to find what works. And that's very difficult. It's taken me almost a year just to get a foothold of what actually works from a technological standpoint for the way I want to teach. And the thing that I can't really encourage people to do enough is don't base technology on branding. If you're a Microsoft fan or an open what do you call it, the open source Microsoft, throw that out. Look at only what has an impact on your students' education, and what has an impact, that technology is the technology you should use. And all too often we're pushed as teachers to use things that really are not effective or don't meet our way of teaching. And so when we go down that road, it becomes busy work. It becomes not as meaningful. And it's very important not to do that. And that happens a lot in a digital environment. And the other thing that tends to happen is both teachers and students can get overloaded with work. You can get yourself into a corner where you have so much grading to do you can never get out. And you can also put your students in a situation where they have so much work that they feel like they can never get out. And you have to be very mindful of that when teaching online. So just to kind of go back and recap, going down to almost my last slide here, ways to engage students. Again, I think after a year teaching online, K-12, I've taught online for community college, built classes for colleges. K-12 is a whole different beast. You really need to try to find a way to deliver multimodal engagement through digital media. That may mean, creating a video that has your audio, delivering that video and audio, and maybe lecture that you want to add to a reading or a science experiment or whatever you're doing, all in one. They can see it on their own. You can play it live for your Google Meet. That enables you to answer questions simultaneously as to teaching. So you're almost replicating yourself in a way. And it works out great if you do have to take a day, because it really doesn't have much of an impact on the students and work still gets done. Students engage in the projects in different ways. So like with the Holmes letters, a lot of them wanted to do it right there in the Google Meet. Some never joined the Google Meet. Some wanted to do it on their own. Some actually read the actual PDFs of the original letters I got in cursive and went into the formative and answered questions. They also like to engage at different times. So this idea of keeping students engaged in virtual learning for 7 hours, that goes against everything we've researched in distance learning. We try to limit that screen time, give students what they need, and let them even in the upper middle school, they can do this. They can kind of use time management and figure out how they best can do their assignments. And this was really prevalent at the beginning of this year, because students were sometimes doing everything by subject versus doing 7 hours a day. And they need that differentiation in virtual environments in order to be successful. And as you all know, we've all been teaching online, and everyone has stories. You've seen students that didn't do anything in the face-to-face environment shine online. They're perfect students. They don't have that social competition to engage in, and they excel. Other students who are straight A students have a difficult time learning at home, maybe, and they've dropped off the grid. They're maybe in the meets every day, but they do nothing. They can't keep up, and they're now failing students. So we've seen major shifts, and I don't see anyone doing a lot of research on this. There's some research being done, but I find these elements to be very interesting. And so you have to build your instruction around what your data is telling you. And if your data is telling you that you're going to reach more students by making your digital formats and your instructional delivery available in different modes, then that's probably the way you want to go, because it'll lead to more effective dissemination of that education so that they're actually getting it to learn. Projects are great. They're a way to engage students while using differentiated instruction. And it infuses everything together. It allows you to break things up and give them breaks. It may take a lot longer to get through a unit or a novel, but I think that's okay. I'm making this recording in the off chance that there's issues with the presentations tomorrow, so that this at least to be available. I wanted to go back and touch on a little bit of the technology again. I mentioned GoFormative, excellent program, but it's not about the branding. It's not about this one tool or that one tool, this LMS versus that LMS. It's about what is effective. And there are other systems out there. There's Book Widgets. Book Widgets is very similar to GoFormative. They have a free and a paid version. It does some things better. Other things it doesn't have. It's a give and take. One other element why I chose to go with formative is it allows me to align all my standards per question and assignment in formative. So at the end of the day, I can look at a report and see where all my students are with all the standards I've hit so far this year, and it'll give you a percentage of how what their mastery of everything you've taught to them is. So if you see something's really low, you can go back and reteach that. And if your administration asks you, well, are you following Common Core standards, you can literally print it out and it'll blow their minds, trust me. So that's one of the reasons why I chose to go with formative, is that added curriculum aspect. Now Book Widgets is really good because it has a few bells and whistles that formative doesn't have, depending on how you teach and how you want to deliver your instruction. Both these are technically freeware, where you get part free but you got to pay to get the good stuff. Another one is Teacher Made. It's along the same genus of family of software. It's not as advanced, but it's free. And if you just wanted something to kind of boost, it's really good. Discussion boards. The only way I know if you're a GAF school, Google Apps for Education school, using Google Classroom, would be Google Groups. There's some talk online about the Blogger software having a forum plugin. I'm a developer, And I looked at it, it's antiquated, it no longer exists, but what it was doing is it was basically jumping another forum site in via iframe, and it just was not very good. So there's really no other option available that I'm aware of if you're Google Apps for Education school. If you're using Blackboard or Moodle or Canvas or I think Edmodo, Schoology, they have the discussion board elements built in, and they're gradable. One note on discussion boards, I'll say, and I told my college instructors this for years, structure your questions carefully. If you ask a yes or no question, you're going to get a yes or no answer. So craft your questions very carefully and be very careful about how you have students respond to others. I've had college instructors tell students that they need to write, a 500 or 1,000 word response to discussion, then they need to respond to at least 7 or 10 other classmates. That is an enormous amount of work. Don't overwhelm your students with responding and forcing them to respond to other students. A good discussion question should prompt a response to the question and prompt, connected and learners. There's connected and separate connected ways of learning. And students in a good discussion environment will start interacting with the instructor's question, and then they'll start interacting with each other, just like in the classroom. And that's what your goal should be. Don't use grading to say you have to respond X number of times, because you're going to get poor responses, canned responses, copy and pasted responses. What you want to do instead is try to facilitate and spark that intrinsic conversation to happen. And you as the instruction want to interject and tell students they're doing great, or say, I didn't think of it that way. That's a great way to think about this concept differently, and motivate them to engage with each other. And you'll have a much more effective discussion. But this is probably very new to the K-12 arena, but it is one of the most crucial tools you can use in any distance education environment. And the way it looks, I think that virtual education is here to stay. I do hope the tools get better in the K-12 realm, as it'll make that delivery and effectiveness of education better, and I'm sure it will over time, if it is in fact a realm of mode of delivery that's going to stay. So I know it's at least here for this year, maybe next. I can't speak to that, but it definitely looks like it's here to stay. If you're interested in some of these sites and things I've mentioned, there's GoFormative.com. There's the CommonLit site, and there's also a website out there called Rethinking Distance Learning and How to Make It Work for All Students. PBL Works. I think PBLWorks.com. You can go there and check that out. And last note, one of the things that I do with my STLP students is I try to, really get them engaged with hands-on, and just to kind of give you an idea, if you're reading or doing a project in class that lends itself to something hands-on, you can create, you can create a video in which you demonstrate something for your students. Here, I actually demonstrated building a hydroponic system for the students. I'm not going to play the video, but I just wanted to show that you can actually do hands-on things, and then these for STLP are actually going to be sent out to students so that they can grow plants on their own, and they know how the systems are built so that they can modify them themselves, and they can do different things with them, and that really gets them going, that really gets them engaged. And there's many different ways to do it. Yes, you have to think out of the box, but it's a really good way to kind of get that added bump needed to get students to log in and actively participate more. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. I'll make this available via YouTube. Hopefully everything will go well with the face-to-face presentations on Friday. But if not, this recording should serve you well.